I watched that fancy gold pen tremble in the boss's hand. Thunder rattled the glass skyscraper, a fitting backdrop to this corporate execution. Her global shipping empire, once worth billions, sinking under $1.2 billion of invisible debt. The Chapter 11 bankruptcy papers lay before her, cold and absolute. The CFO demanded surrender while expensive lawyers tapped their luxury watches. She finally touched the gold tip to paper, ready to sign, until my quiet voice broke the silence of the room. Just the invisible guy emptying their paper shredders. "Wait," I whispered, hands trembling. "You missed this figure right here. Let us step inside that freezing boardroom at Caldwell Maritime together, shall we?" Even with the air conditioning, the CEO was clearly suffocating. At 34, she was one of the youngest female billionaire CEOs around. She had inherited this massive shipping firm straight from her grandfather, growing it from a regional fleet into a global supply chain powerhouse. From the corners, I always admired her brilliant mind and sharp suits. She always stayed incredibly calm under heavy pressure. But today I saw only panic and the ruin of her legacy. 300 pages of financial ruin sat on that giant boardroom table. A Chapter 11 corporate bankruptcy filing, marked up by high-priced senior partners at Kirkland & Ellis. The expensive restructuring attorneys, brought in to scavenge whatever scraps remained. For 8 long months, the shipping business had been bleeding cash. It began quietly with one small missed financial projection over here, and a minor spike in fuel there. You and I know how fast things crumble. Soon their major credit lines froze completely. The young CEO just stared blankly at the paperwork. Cold terms like asset liquidation and deep job cuts. Words meaning 40,000 regular working people like me would lose everything. Evelyn, a smooth, rehearsed voice suddenly cut through her daze. That belonged to Grayson Langdon, her chief financial officer. Grayson was a smooth Wall Street veteran in his late 50s, with slick silver hair and a spotless reputation. He was her grandfather's trusted golden boy, the advisor who supposedly guided her early career. "I know this is painful," Grayson said smoothly, placing a comforting but completely fake hand on her shoulder. His voice dripped with fake sympathy. "But we have tried absolutely everything. The European markets collapsed and fuel prices spiked beyond control. Plus those sudden tariffs, it was just a perfect storm. Nobody blames you, but if we do not sign before the New York market opens, our angry creditors will force us straight into Chapter 7. We won't survive this. They will tear us apart and sell the scrap." William Bradley, the senior bankruptcy attorney from Kirkland, loudly cleared his throat. Another expensive suit who did not care about the human lives he was destroying. "Mr. Langdon is right, Miss Caldwell. Your grace period expired at midnight. The bankruptcy judge is already waiting on our official filing. If we wait, the board will sue you personally for failing your duties. We need your signature." From my quiet corner, I watched Evelyn fight back tears. "Let's look closer." She never cried, especially not around high-priced lawyers billing by the minute. I knew her mind was elsewhere, on Virginia shipyards, Rotterdam dock workers, and Seattle logistics. Thousands of ordinary people trusted her, and they were all about to be blindsided. "How did we miss $1 billion deficit, Grayson?" she asked her CFO. Her voice was a broken whisper. She clearly hadn't slept in 3 days. "Our internal audits were flawless. Ernst & Young cleared us only 2 quarters ago. How does $1 billion in operational capital just vanish into thin air?" Grayson adjusted his expensive silk tie. "Complex supply chains, Evelyn. Those tiny localized subsidiaries down in the Caribbean and Southeast Asia hid their massive losses to hit quarterly targets. By the time those consolidated reports hit my desk, the damage was terminal. A tragic failure, but completely out of our hands." I watched her stare. From my dusty corner, I caught a quick, nasty gleam of impatience in his eyes. But her exhausted mind was far too clouded by grief to catch his lie. She looked utterly defeated. The math did not lie. Their accounts were drained. She picked up her heavy Mont Blanc pen. It felt cold and wrong. I watched her uncap it, staring at the chief executive officer's signature line. That expensive gold pen hovered right over the paper. The boardroom fell completely silent, save for the hum of the giant air conditioner and the soft, quiet rustle of my heavy trash bag in the corner. You see, I was entirely invisible in that room, and I preferred it. At 42, I wore the gray uniform of a commercial cleaning crew. I pushed a rolling mop bucket wearing a utility belt packed with rags, and carrying a crushing, suffocating mountain of debt. I was not always this invisible. 5 years ago, I was a senior actuary at PwC running complex financial risk models for Fortune 500 giants. I owned a nice suburban house and had a beautiful wife, Sarah, and a bright-eyed little boy named Leo. Then the universe rolled the dice, and I lost absolutely everything. Sarah died suddenly from a ruptured brain aneurysm. 6 months later, little Leo was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The American medical system, with its maze of deductibles and out-of-network bills and expensive experimental treatments, completely destroyed my comfortable middle-class life. I missed too much work at PwC sitting by my son's hospital bed. They quietly let me go. Medical bills piled high, swallowing my savings, my 401k, and my home. Now we live in a cramped, freezing 2-bedroom apartment. Leo is finally in remission, thank God. But daily medications and a lingering million-dollar debt meant taking any humble night job that let me be with my boy by day. So I clean the glowing glass castles of the ultra-wealthy every night. Tonight, my cleaning shift had been brutal. You and I know how panic looks. This office was trashed with half-eaten food and crumpled legal pads. These powerful elites had been pulling desperate all-nighters. Arthur, the invisible cleaner, clocked in at 10. His shift ended at 6. But stick with me, his boss threatened his pay unless the executive boardroom was spotless for the big meeting at 7. At 6:15, while wiping down the massive, frosted smart glass walls displaying the company's bleak financial data, the ignored cleaner paused. The powerful executives left their master financial ledger projected on the glass. Just a complex maze of spreadsheets, showing the firm's operating expenses for the entire past year. To most people, it was just a wall of boring, glowing corporate numbers. But Arthur had an actuarial mind. It was a language he read absolutely fluently. He leaned against his squeegee, eyes scanning the failing corporate columns. A habit he simply could not break. He craved pure mathematical order. Numbers never lied to him. Math never got sick. But as his eyes tracked the global fleet operating expenses, he spotted what the powerful bosses missed. Something was wrong, violently, terribly wrong. He stepped closer to the glass, ignoring his fresh smudge. The ledger detailed bunker fuel surcharges for 20 Panamax cargo ships operating out of Nassau. The costs were astronomical, accounting for nearly $400 million of the company's deficit. Arthur pulled out a crumpled notepad, the exact one he used for Leo's medication schedule. He did some quick mental math, jotting down a few figures. The corporate books claimed these exact ships burned maximum fuel allotments while running high seas routes between South America and Europe. But Arthur's eyes darted to the adjacent logistical fleet column, which listed the scheduled dry dock windows. He completely froze, his breath caught in his throat. Vessel 402, fuel expense $8.5 million. Status in Q3, dry docked in Freeport for retrofitting. Vessel 406, Q3 fuel $9.2 million. Status, dry docked in Port of Spain. They're charging fuel to parked ships, Arthur whispered. He saw the rot the board refused to acknowledge. He kept scanning it. 12 of those 20 ships, racking up massive fuel bills, had been grounded for routine maintenance. You don't burn bunker fuel when a vessel sits on blocks getting its hull scraped. Arthur checked the routing numbers for those exact corporate payments. They weren't going to standard suppliers like Exxon or Shell. Let's look at this together. Hundreds of millions were funneled to Nassau Maritime Logistics LLC. The company wasn't failing from bad markets. It wasn't a complex supply chain breakdown either. It was a total ghost company. Someone on the executive team was authorizing payments for phantom fuel, hiding cash in offshore shell accounts. Textbook corporate embezzlement executed right under the CEO's nose at scale. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. He checked the clock. 6:45. The executives were starting to arrive. He had to run. If the board caught him analyzing their financial data, he wouldn't just be fired. He could face corporate espionage charges. And he desperately needed this paycheck. He needed the company health insurance for his son Leo's bone marrow biopsy. He aggressively wiped his finger smudge off the glass wall, threw his cleaning supplies into the cart, and rushed for the door. Keep your head down, Arthur muttered to himself. Let the corporate billionaires bleed, not his problem. Stick with me here. As he pushed his cart aside to grab the last trash bag, the heavy oak doors swung open. Evelyn Caldwell glided in like a corporate ghost, flanked by Grayson Langdon and a ruthless pack of bankruptcy lawyers. Arthur was completely trapped. He melted into the shadows, endlessly sorting the recycling, hoping those powerful executives would ignore the invisible man in the gray uniform. For 20 tense minutes he stood listening to their agonizing meeting. He heard the chief financial officer blame shifting European markets. He heard the slick attorney demand her immediate signature. He heard the raw grief in Evelyn's voice as she begged to know how $1 billion simply vanished. He saw exactly what those high-paid executives missed. I know how, Arthur thought, gripping his trash bin until his knuckles turned white. I know exactly where it went. He watched the chief executive uncap her pen. He remembered his own crushing despair when a hospital billing department handed him the paper that ended his entire life. He recognized that exact same emptiness, that terrified look in the rich woman's eyes. Before logic could weigh the professional risks, his conscience completely hijacked his mouth. Wait, that single word exploded into the dead silent boardroom like a live grenade. William Bradley, the expensive lawyer, instantly whipped his head around, adjusting his glasses as if trying to bring an alien life form into focus. Grayson Langdon froze, his entire posture instantly stiffening. Evelyn froze, her gold pen hovering just a millimeter above the dotted line. She turned slowly, her sharp gaze finally landing on the invisible man in the corner. Arthur stepped out from the dark alcove, feeling absolutely, completely ridiculous for doing this. He wore scuffed steel-toed boots and a cheap gray uniform stained with bleach. He was only holding a half-empty bag of shredded papers. He looked closely at Chicago's most powerful executives and swallowed incredibly hard. Excuse me, the lawyer snapped, his sharp voice cutting through the room like a whip. Who the hell are you? Security. Don't sign it, Arthur warned. Notice this shift. His voice shook at first, but gained steady strength as he approached the grand mahogany table. You missed a critical figure, a massive one. Get this janitor out of here immediately. Grayson Langdon barked, his arrogant face flushing a sudden deep crimson. He lunged for the wall intercom to call security. This is a strictly confidential legal proceeding. You are trespassing. Stop. Evelyn's voice was quiet, but it carried absolute commanding authority. It was the steady voice of a leader who commanded massive fleets across oceans. Langdon's hand hovered directly over the call button. Bradley snapped his mouth shut. Evelyn simply stared at Arthur. For once, someone looked past the cheap uniform and mop cart, staring directly into his eyes. Looking closer, she saw the heavy bags and his pure exhaustion, but also a sharp, undeniable analytical intelligence. Who are you? She asked, her tone cold but genuinely curious. My name is Arthur Hayes. I work for Horizon Facility Services, Arthur declared, finally standing straight. But before that, I was a senior actuary at PwC. I specialized in forensic risk assessment for maritime logistics. We know better, right? Langdon just let out a harsh, mocking laugh. A janitor who used to be an actuary, how poetic. Evelyn, please, the court is waiting. The man is clearly deranged. He probably glanced at a spreadsheet and thinks he cracked the Da Vinci Code. Let him speak, Evelyn ordered, looking closely at the quiet man they all chose to ignore. You have exactly 60 seconds, Mr. Hayes. What number did I miss? Let's watch closely. Arthur stepped past those blind, arrogant lawyers, heading to the glass. He picked up a simple dry erase marker resting right on the ledge. Your CFO, Arthur said, pointing his marker straight at Langdon, told you that your deficit was caused by market contraction and localized subsidiary losses. That's a lie. Defamation, Langdon barked, lunging a step toward Arthur. Evelyn, I will not stand here and be insulted by the help. 50 seconds, Mr. Hayes, Evelyn replied calmly, even though her heart was pounding hard now. Arthur turned, tapping the glass to expose the master ledger he had quietly studied from the shadows. He firmly circled the heading, Global Fleet Operating Expenses, Caribbean Division. Look at this column, Arthur instructed. His voice shed the janitor disguise, adopting the sharp tone of a master auditor. This details the bunker fuel surcharges for your Panamax fleet in the Caribbean, specifically ships 401 through 420. The total corporate spend for 3 quarters hits roughly $420 million. Fuel prices are at a record high. Bradley snapped back, completely blind. We know this, it's a major factor in the bankruptcy. Yes, fuel is expensive, Arthur fired back, but it only costs money if you actually burn it. He swiped the screen, revealing the logs those powerful executives completely ignored. He drew a red line linking Ship 402's fuel cost directly to its true status. Ship 402 billed $8.5 million for Q3 fuel. But according to your own dry dock maintenance logs, Vessel 402 spent all of Q3 sitting on blocks getting its hull retrofitted. It didn't burn a single drop of diesel. The entire boardroom went totally silent. You and I only heard the rain drumming against the cold office windows. Arthur didn't stop there. He dragged another harsh red line. Ship 406 $9.2 million status dry docked in Port of Spain. Ship 411 $7 million status impounded for customs review in Kingston. He turned right back around, locking his sharp eyes onto Evelyn's. 12 of the 20 ships in this fleet have been out of the water for most of a year. Yet they are billing maximum capacity fuel consumption. And if you look at the routing numbers, Arthur tapped the screen, exposing the hidden vendor. Every single cent of that $420 million was paid to a vendor called Nassau Maritime Logistics LLC. Evelyn slowly rose from her chair. Those Chapter 11 bankruptcy documents fluttered slightly as she moved. She stepped to the glass, finally looking closely at the fake fuel costs and true maintenance logs. The truth was painfully simple once the invisible man finally pointed it out. You and I know it was so obvious only the powerful could miss it, who completely controlled both sets of ledgers and authorized those blind audits. She turned her head slowly, her piercing gaze locking right onto Grayson Langdon. All panic drained from the CEO's face, replaced entirely by a terrifying cold, predatory calm. "Grayson," she whispered. From my corner with the trash can, I watched the room freeze. "What is Nassau Maritime Logistics LLC?" Langdon's face went completely pale. The silver-haired executive suddenly looked tiny from my vantage point, hands shaking on the table. "Evelyn, it's a standard fuel routing subsidiary. The logs must be some clerical error from the Caribbean office, just a systemic glitch." "A $400 million glitch on parked ships," I interjected dryly. "I checked the corporate registry on my phone while I was emptying your trash. Nassau Maritime Logistics LLC isn't a fuel supplier. It is a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. Set up 14 months ago, exactly when your cash flow issues began." "Shut up!" Langdon screamed at me, completely losing his slick corporate mask. "You know nothing. You're a glorified maid." "William," Evelyn said, staring daggers at the desperate CEO. The lawyer practically jumped. "Yes, Ms. Caldwell. Call the FBI white-collar crime division. Then call the bankruptcy judge and pull our filing." "Evelyn, wait. Be reasonable," Langdon begged, stepping toward her with his hands raised in surrender. "We can fix this mess. Let's just talk in private. If you take one more step toward me, Grayson, I will throw you out this window myself," Evelyn hissed, her voice dripping with pure venom. Then she turned back to me. I was still standing quietly by the glass, still clutching my dry erase marker. "Just think about it. The powerful billionaire and the invisible janitor in the boardroom wreckage." "Mr. Hayes," Evelyn said, her breathing heavy, the realization of what just happened clearly washing over her. I had just saved her company. An overlooked janitor saved 40,000 jobs. She studied my stained uniform, then down at the financial ledger I had effortlessly decoded. "You said you were an actuary. Why are you wearing a Horizon facility uniform?" I looked down at my boots. The adrenaline faded, replaced by the heavy exhaustion of my reality. My son Leo got sick, leukemia. I missed too much work, lost my job, lost my insurance. The medical debt wiped me out. I clean buildings at night so I can take him to chemo during the day. Evelyn Caldwell just stared at me. I watched the crushing weight on her chest finally lift, replaced by a fierce, burning clarity. She grabbed those legal bankruptcy papers off the table and slowly, deliberately ripped them right in half. "Mr. Hayes," Evelyn said, a genuine, powerful smile breaking across her face for the first time in over a year. "I think you just cleaned your last floor." The immediate aftermath in that Caldwell Maritime boardroom was absolute chaos, but a beautiful, vindicating kind of destruction. "William, The attorney who spent all week treating Evelyn like some naive heiress was now frantically dialing the federal courthouse. His hands were slick with sweat. And Grayson Langdon, pinned against the mahogany wall by two massive corporate security guards. His perfect silver hair totally wrecked, his expensive silk tie hanging sideways. Babbling non-stop about misunderstandings and offshore tax loopholes, but absolutely nobody was listening anymore. You'd expect her to gloat, right? She didn't, never even raised her voice. She just watched him, the cold, detached fascination of a scientist studying a dying bug. I stood there, invisible, watching Evelyn order security to drag him to the garage. Keep him locked in holding room B until the FBI gets here. If he even touches his phone, she warned, smash it. The heavy oak doors clicked shut on the ruined executive. Stay with me. This is where everything changed. Then the powerful CEO locked her intense gaze directly on me. I stood frozen beside my mop bucket, utterly terrified by the corporate storm a nobody like me had just unleashed. Mr. Hayes, Evelyn said slowly, walking straight toward me. The sharp tap of her expensive heels echoed across the hardwood I had just buffed. How much is your son's treatment? Her sudden, highly personal question caught me totally off guard. Excuse me, the leukemia, she pressed, the bone marrow biopsy. The clinical trials, she clarified, her cold voice softening ever so slightly. What is your total debt? What do you need today for his immediate care? I could only stare down at my worn steel-toed work boots. The bills from his first chemotherapy are already $300,000. And the transplant. They want him at Memorial Sloan Kettering over in New York. With extra expenses, relocation, and specialized recovery, we are looking at $500,000. I do not have that kind of money, Miss Caldwell. That is why I clean your floors. She strode over to her massive mahogany desk and grabbed a yellow legal pad. Then, she slipped a thin black checkbook out of her leather portfolio. She scribbled quickly, each stroke of her pen sharp, deliberate, and precise. Ripping the paper check from the book, she offered it directly to me. I hesitated, quickly wiping my dirty hands on my uniform trousers before taking it. I stared at the numbers, at her bold signature, my breath completely caught. I looked up at her, my eyes wide with absolute shock and panic. Miss Caldwell, I cannot accept this. I just pointed out a spreadsheet mistake. I am not a charity case. This is not charity, Arthur, she answered softly. Do not argue, she insisted. That is your new signing bonus. You just saved my family business from being torn apart and sold off. More importantly, you have forensic financial skills that my multi-million-dollar accounting firm missed entirely. You saw exactly what those powerful experts ignored. I do not need another janitor. I need an investigator who understands exactly how desperate executives hide stolen cash. She stepped closer, pointing at the glass wall where my hidden financial discoveries still glowed. Grayson Langdon did not do this alone. A massive $400 million fraud scheme involving 20 giant cargo ships and fake manifests. Hiding money in Cayman accounts requires resources he simply does not have. Someone backed him, someone with limitless wealth and power. I want to know who is trying to destroy my company, she said, and you will expose them. I looked from the check in my hand to the damning numbers on the screen. The skilled analyst inside me, buried for 5 years under medical bills, suddenly woke up. Let's find exactly what those powerful executives missed. I pictured my sweet boy Leo shivering in our freezing apartment. Then I imagined the top-tier cancer specialists waiting for us in New York. Slowly, I folded the check and tucked it safely inside my pocket. When do I begin? Right now, she answered. Keep those files open. Over the next 72 hours, I watched her luxury penthouse office turn into an absolute war room. We practically took over the entire 50th floor. They gave an ignored analyst a corner office, 3 fast rigs, and full server access. Sleep was a luxury, fueled by endless black coffee and the rush of finally being seen. I hunted. I ignored their polished lies. Skipping the useless internal audits, I dug straight into raw Swift codes. I traced the wire transfers to Nassau Maritime Logistics. It was a beautiful, chaotic maze. But the money didn't just sit in the Caymans. It was instantly shattered, split into hundreds of tiny, quiet payments. Then bounced through offshore shell companies from Cyprus to the Isle of Man. Classic smurfing, a laundering trick designed to slip right past automated bank alerts. But I wasn't some blind machine. I was just an overlooked father with a savant's grasp of probability and risk. I hunted for the one thing these powerful criminals always fail to hide, the convergence point. No matter how scattered, the money always flows back to its master. Late on day 3, under a bruised Chicago twilight, I stormed into Evelyn's office. No knocking this time. She was arguing with a federal prosecutor, her face completely pale with exhaustion. She raised a finger, wrapped up the call, and hung up. "Tell me you have something, Arthur," she begged. "The board is panicking. The press knows we withdrew the bankruptcy, and our stock is plummeting. They think I've lost my mind," she sighed. I dropped the thick file onto her desk. I finally found the convergence point. Evelyn leaned forward, slowly opening the folder. Inside lay pages of highlighted banking logs, mapping out their entire international cash web. The money sent to Nassau Logistics routed through 14 different countries. I explained, my voice completely hoarse. But 70% of it eventually consolidated into a private wealth account in Zurich. I managed to cross-reference the routing codes. I ran the Swiss account numbers against corporate dividend payouts. I reached over and tapped the one name all their expensive lawyers had missed. The beneficiary of that Zurich account is Apex Horizon, a holding company owned solely by Thomas Sterling. I watched her corporate confidence freeze. She stared at his name, the letters burning into her mind. Thomas Sterling, the billionaire boss of Sterling Global Freight. Her most aggressive shipping rival in the entire North Atlantic. A ruthless old-school shipping giant who spent 10 years trying to buy Evelyn out. He was furious that a woman half his age kept beating him in Europe. "It wasn't just embezzlement," Evelyn whispered, realizing the sheer malice of it. This was corporate sabotage, a hostile takeover from the inside out. "Exactly," I muttered, leaning heavily against her expensive desk. "Sterling paid off Grayson Langdon to invent that fake fuel crisis. They systematically drained your cash to force a Chapter 11 filing. Once you went under, your assets would go to auction. Sterling was ready to buy your entire fleet for pennies on the dollar at auction. Grayson walked away with a $50 million cut in the Caymans, while Sterling swallowed your empire whole." I stood in the corner, watching Evelyn pace toward the glass. She stared at the Chicago skyline, just a ghost against those bright city lights. Those powerful men played her. Pushed to corporate bankruptcy by men she trusted. A rival orchestrated it all, assuming my boss was too blind to spot the knife in her back. I saw her eyes watering, but trust me, this wasn't about financial ruin. It was pure, burning, blinding rage. She finally turned around to face me. "Do we have enough to prove it in federal court?" "We have the digital footprint," I said, "but Sterling has the world's best lawyers. They will say the Swiss account is a blind trust and ignore the Caymans. To nail him, freeze his assets, and recover your $400 million, we need a real confession. We need Grayson Langdon to turn on him." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, looking truly dangerous. "Grayson is in federal holding, refusing to talk to anyone but his expensive lawyer. He still thinks Sterling will protect him. Then we must make him realize," I said quietly, "that Sterling is feeding him to the wolves." Evelyn smiled, and it was a genuinely terrifying look. "Grab your coat, Arthur. We are paying our former CFO a little visit. Let's step inside the Federal Detention Center downtown. Is absolutely bleak. A sterile concrete fortress under buzzing, cold, fluorescent lights. Nothing like the luxurious penthouses Grayson Langdon was used to enjoying. He sat in a cramped interrogation room, swallowed by a cheap orange jumpsuit. I noticed his hands trembling against the cold metal table. When the heavy steel door clanked open, he expected his high-priced lawyer. Instead, Evelyn Caldwell and I walked right in. Grayson scoffed, desperately faking his old arrogant wealthy persona. "You shouldn't be here, Evelyn. My lawyer will have a field day with this. And you brought the janitor." "How touching. Arthur is my new chief risk officer." Evelyn fired back, pulling out a chair to sit directly across from him. "And I am here because I am the only person left who can save you from spending your life in a maximum security prison. I have absolutely nothing to say to you." Grayson sneered. "I am pleading the fifth. Stick with me here." I stepped forward and tossed a paper onto the cold table. A screenshot of an encrypted email I personally dragged from the deepest trenches of his deleted files. "We know all about Thomas Sterling, Grayson," I told him calmly. His breath caught. I watched his eyes dawning with fear as they hit the paper. His arrogant facade cracked instantly. We traced every single cent. I kept pushing him, my voice relentless. From Nassau Maritime to Cyprus, straight into the Zurich Deutsche Bank account controlled by Sterling's company. I built the entire map myself. The FBI is already drafting the financial warrants. Sterling promised he would protect you, didn't he? Evelyn leaned closer, her voice dripping with heavy mock sympathy. He promised his lawyers would protect you if caught. He swore those Cayman embezzlement accounts were completely untraceable. And guess what? He lied. She revealed a freshly printed corporate press release. I watched Evelyn slide the printout across the table. This hit the wire 10 minutes ago, she said. I saw Grayson read it, his face completely draining of all color. It was an official statement from Sterling Global Freight. They flatly denied any link to the corporate fraud at Caldwell Maritime. They blamed a rogue financial contractor for secretly hacking their entire system. He is burning you, Grayson, Evelyn whispered. He will claim you hacked his Swiss accounts to hide the money you stole. He is setting you up to take the fall for the entire billion-dollar deficit. He walks away and you rot in prison. Grayson started to panic. He grabbed his chest as the heavy reality of his betrayal finally crashed down. You and I see the truth. He played with ruthless billionaires only to get discarded like a pawn. What do you want? Grayson choked out, tears of panic streaming down his face. I want you to testify, Evelyn demanded, her voice cutting like absolute steel. I need you to give the FBI the encryption keys to your private chats with Sterling. I want you detailing every meeting, every wire transfer, and every single bribe. You hand me Thomas Sterling on a silver platter, and I will personally ask the federal prosecutor to recommend a reduced prison sentence at a minimum security facility. You refuse, and I will make sure they bury you deep under the jail. Grayson looked at Evelyn, then right at me. I gave him no sympathy, only justice. Okay, Grayson sobbed, burying his face deep into his hands. Okay, I will give you everything. Stick with me. 3 days later, the corporate world completely shifted. The FBI raided the New York headquarters of Sterling Global Freight. Thomas Sterling was arrested directly on the JFK tarmac, desperately trying to board his private Gulfstream jet bound for a non-extradition country in South America. The digital evidence I had personally compiled, combined with Grayson's explosive whistleblower testimony, built an insurmountable mountain of guilt. The Department of Justice immediately froze all of Sterling's assets, including the $420 million stolen from Caldwell Maritime. Every single dollar was returned within a week. Evelyn Caldwell quickly called an emergency meeting with her board of directors. They sat around the same mahogany table where they had just demanded her complete surrender. Now they stared at her in pure awe and terror. The massive deficit is gone, Evelyn announced to the dead silent room, her voice echoing with absolute authority. The fleet is fully operational. Our credit lines are restored by Chase and Goldman Sachs. Sterling Global Freight is currently sitting under federal receivership. I just instructed our acquisitions team to prepare a hostile takeover of their European assets. We are avoiding bankruptcy proceedings. We are going to war. The board instantly erupted into applause, but Evelyn raised her hand, silencing them all. There is one more crucial matter, she said, turning toward the back of the room. I stepped forward. You see, they never noticed the man in the stained gray uniform. Now I wore a sharply tailored midnight blue Armani suit. I carried a leather briefcase, my posture straight and my eyes bright with purpose. I want to formally introduce our new chief risk officer, she smiled, Mr. The CEO stood there, calling out Arthur's name. Without him, this company doesn't exist. His word is my word. If he tells you a number is wrong, you listen. The same rich board members who mocked our quiet colleague days ago, they stood up, offering handshakes. Arthur just smiled politely. But let's look 1 year later. Bright light filled the windows of the Sloan Kettering Pediatric Cancer Ward. Arthur finally relaxed in a padded chair. He held a warm coffee, watching the greatest thing a father could ever see. His young son Leo was running down the hospital hallway. The boy looked fragile, his hair growing back in soft, uneven patches. But his cheeks were rosy, and genuine laughter echoed off those sterile walls. The intense bone marrow transplant had been a complete success. The terrible cancer was finally in full remission. Evelyn Caldwell sat right beside him, wearing fine cashmere, holding a toy pirate balloon. She watched Leo run up to a nurse. "He's got energy," Evelyn remarked, a genuinely warm smile lighting up her face. "He's a fighter," Arthur replied, his voice thick with tears. He looked at the powerful billionaire, now his close friend and greatest ally. "Thank you for everything." "You don't owe me anything, Arthur," Evelyn whispered, watching the kid. "You saved my entire life's work. I just made sure you kept yours." Arthur looked at his fine new watch. No more scrubbing floors late at night. No more dodging debt collectors in the dark. He just had to take his healthy boy home, read a story, and wake up tomorrow to run a corporate empire. You see, sometimes this world just takes everything from you. But when you watch from the shadows and look closer than anyone else, you take it all back. You and I rarely see stories with this much grit and pure fate. Arthur's rise from a broken, struggling father to company savior proves that real brilliance hides in plain sight, right under their noses. It's a powerful reminder. The quiet workers society ignores usually hold the exact answers that powerful leaders are desperate to find. Evelyn actually listened to the invisible man, saving her entire empire. And it ultimately saved a boy's life. If this story of corporate secrets and quiet survival, and a father's fierce love kept you watching today, please hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a great underdog. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out on real-life mysteries just like this one. Let us know in the comments. What would you do in Arthur's shoes?